I think we're ready to begin. So, oh, okay. Mhm. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Township of Woolwich Special Council Budget Meeting on January 23rd, 2024. We welcome everyone attending in person or watching via our YouTube channel. We've got an echo. We good? Council had our first budget session this morning. We'll be continuing with the operating budgets this afternoon. Council started the afternoon in closed session, so we will now reconvene in open session. Do I need a motion for that? Motion to reconvene in open session. Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And we are going to start this afternoon off with corporate services, and I'll call on Clerk Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Sean. So I'll just pull up my presentation on the screen here. With me today, I have several staff. We're going to try to do our budget. We're going to present the grants report that was included in your package. We're going to present the AMPS report that was in your package, and we're going to go over the justification for a staffing position. So trying to do all that here. With me, I have Shane Turner. He's a consultant for Municipal Compliance Solutions. He's helped us with the AMPS report. We have Alex Smith, our deputy clerk, Barry Girth, our manager of IT, and Shelley Noble, human resources generalist. That sort of gives you a preview of our different divisions. So the grants budget is included in the corporate services division. We have the clerk's department, IT, bylaw enforcement. I didn't mention crossing guards. That'll be a quick one. Human resources, and then the corporate overhead budget. So anything that sort of doesn't fall anywhere else does fall in our department. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Alex to go over the grants recommendation.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. So this afternoon, it's a different format today. This afternoon, you have your grants report in front of you. I just want to briefly go over that. The first six recommendations, the first 6 points of the recommendation, which you can see on your screen. And in the report, that is what we've continued on pre-approved grants from last year and will continue for the term of council. In December of last year, you received presentations from 3 of our new applicants. Staff are recommending that we provide 3,152 shelter movers, 1,800 to Maryhill Historical Society for their capital grant. That was what they previously had received from when they had an annual operating grant. And this additional funding we have found through our reserves in the grants budget, and that means that there's no impact on the levy to provide these amounts to the grant applicants. And we're also recommending that we decline the grant from Junior Achievement of Southwestern Ontario. The last thing I want to highlight about the grants budget is that we have also included a new grants category for arts and culture initiatives, events, and activities. We've seen an uptake in applications of this nature and want to provide that for our community. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there questions? Councillor Grant and then Councillor Schwind.
Thank you. Through you to Alex, I'm just wondering if you could tell us about the type of events that the Arts and Cultural Grant would be funding.
Thank you, Councillor Grant, through you, Mayor Shantz. So that would be any event that would fall under kind of the umbrella of arts and culture. Last year we had a grant for the, it was from the Three Sisters organization. That's an arts and culture organization, and it it was kind of like an art tour. So something like that would be funded through this instead of one of our other categories. It could be anything from, I mean, again, it's under that huge umbrella of arts and culture. I think it would follow the theme of our grants and culture policy, our grants and special assistance policy that we currently have. So it would be for not-for-profit or charitable organizations.
Counselor Schwint.
Thanks. Just want to clarify on the grants. I believe I still see $6,000 for equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that's not pre-approved and not the clerk's discretion throughout the year. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Schwint, can you clarify what you mean by pre-approved? It is included in our grants budget, that allocation that council put forward last year. So that is included to continue that funding, but it's not pre-approved for anyone.
Right. So it's available for new projects.
Yes, through Mayor Shantz, yes.
Perfect.
Anyone else? No? Okay, thanks. Next is Jeff. Carry on.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. So after the grants budget, we get into the clerk's department. It's really mostly a status quo budget for council. We did remove an admin assistant position after a person resigned, so there's some savings there. We wanted to point out that our lottery revenue is not recovered post-COVID, so we have seen a drop in that. I also wanted to go over what's not included in the clerk's budget. So we had been looking at some emergency communication support through a contracted service. Unfortunately, that didn't make the budget cut. And if council remembers, the 2S LGBTQ plus ad hoc working group had recommended an equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging staff resource, and that didn't make the budget cut either. So those aren't in the clerk's budget. If we go to IT operating, again, it's mostly a status quo budget. Just to give council a bit of an idea of what we're looking at, we're seeing our software subscriptions increase annually, particularly Microsoft Office 365 licensing. We have seen some increase to our managed vulnerability scanning service, and we have allocated some IT staff members time to support HR. This year, the IT department will focus on continuing to support other departments, implementing new technologies, identifying and preventing cybersecurity threats, and staff training. On the bylaw enforcement side of things, major changes this year, we are proposing to implement the Administrative Monetary Penalty System, AMPS, and we have some more slides to go over that by mid-year. So that half-year net would be about a $900 decrease to the budget if you want to go ahead with that. We're also proposing a new position, the Manager of Bylaw Enforcement Services, and I'll have some slides on that later. Again, we didn't fill that part-time admin assistant position. The duties have been allocated to some of our officers. And then we have ordered a new hybrid vehicle in 2023. After delivery, we're expecting to see our actuals in fuel and repairs go down when that more efficient vehicle is purchased. So with this, I'm actually going to ask Mr. Turner, Shane, to help me with the AMPS business case, and I'll turn the floor over to him.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Mayor Shantz and members of council for this opportunity. The intent here is to give an overview of what an AMPS program is. It is officially known as the Administrative Monetary Penalty System. It's another word for tickets and fines, to be quite honest. The Provincial Offences Act process that staff follow now has its challenges, and the challenges that Woolwich faces are not dissimilar to what other municipalities are facing across the province. So the AMPS program is a more customer-friendly, less formal, less intimidating way to adjudicate bylaw charges. The current system is adjudicated through the provincial court system, which is located in downtown Kitchener. The ability for the AMP's customer service process to have its most significant impact is the ability for someone that receives a ticket to be able to come in and talk to staff. They don't have to go through the court process. They can sit down with staff, and staff will have increased powers to try to resolve the ticket through a dispute resolution process versus what is more formal and intimidating, which is the court system. It's certainly more timely. I believe Mr. Smith has a couple of examples of actual tickets that that have been experienced here, and that'll be coming up in a moment. It also the system also provides council with the ability to set the monetary penalties, another word for fines, based on the needs of the community, with a focus on gaining compliance and promoting officer safety. The officer safety piece comes in the ability for bylaw offenses to, or bylaw notices, I should say, to be served in a variety of ways versus what sometimes can be challenging circumstances, like issuing parking tickets on vehicles in the middle of a school zone during snow events, that sort of stuff. The service provisions in the under an AMP system allow for tickets to be mailed or hand delivered to a house at a later date, decreasing the officer safety risks with having to deal with personal interactions when tempers might otherwise be frayed, let me say. So, Jeff, sorry, I'm looking at the next slide. The dispute resolution process involves a person receiving a parking ticket, starting with, well, we're talking specifically about parking tickets at this point. That's probably what is going to be recommended as the starting point for transitioning bylaws. But the AMP system allows for a person that's received a ticket to come into town hall or via email or phone to discuss the circumstances around a ticket. And at that point, staff will have information on the ticket itself. So they'll have access to photographs or anything that supports the issuing of the ticket. That screening process allows for staff to be able to lower the ticket price if the circumstances warranted, maybe go so far as to cancel a ticket if circumstances warranted, or certainly uphold the ticket in situations where that's warranted as well. But it's a face-to-face discussion. It's not formal like in a courthouse where you can only speak when you're allowed to, and that sort of stuff. The ability for people to submit an email allows for the customer to not have to take time off work to attend in downtown Kitchener to the courthouse down there. The hearings and the screenings, that entire process is done within the confines of the township system as opposed to having any involvement in the Kitchener courthouse. If someone's not satisfied with the decision of the screening, they can ask for a hearing, and that hearing will be held before, and it can be held virtually as well from a customer service standpoint, but will be held with a person appointed by council as a hearing officer. That hearing officer has to be, or cannot, sorry, I'll rephrase it, cannot be a municipal employee. It would be somebody that is contracted by the municipality, an independent body. There are opportunities, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but there are opportunities to partner with other municipalities within the region that already have AMP systems to use that same type of process. Hearings, typically the screening process and the hearing process from start to finish would allow for a bylaw offense to be adjudicated within about 2 to 3 months. The system now, I believe it's on the next slide. Jeff, this is an example. Perhaps I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So from the township's perspective, I have an example of a parking ticket that I can give you. It was issued on February 18th, 2022. Right now, there's $70 owing plus court costs. So this person that got a ticket, they are still waiting for their trial, which has now been scheduled for April 2nd of this year. We're on about a 2-year wait for tickets. The POA court has adapted to post-COVID to allow hybrid meetings or hybrid attendance, but if the person wanted to attend in person, it would be the POA court office in Kitchener. And then, of course, if we were to move to the AMP system, the dispute could be handled, as Shane said, by a screening officer or a hearing officer. We have the option for reducing the fine or adding a payment plan if that was really the issue that the person was asking about. We may have been able to involve to settle the dispute on first contact just by someone coming into the office or calling the office. And as I said, we would try to get that hearing time down to 2 to 3 months rather than 2 years. Shane?
Thanks, thanks, Jeff, and through you, Mayor Shantz. Just as an example, if I could, regarding from a timing perspective, when I was formerly with the cities of Kitchener and Waterloo before I retired, and we implemented AMPS in the city of Waterloo in 2019, and we saw over a 90% drop in the number of people requesting trials versus hearings within the first 6 months, which is really an indication of how an adjudication and dispute resolution system where people have the opportunity to compromise can help with quicker resolutions as opposed to what typically is a win-lose situation in court. Guilty, not guilty is another way of, in my mind, of saying win-lose. Whereas the AMP system does allow for that flexibility, again, as situations warrant. First-time ticket offense maybe gets a break. Third or fourth time for the same offense, probably not as much of a break. But the key piece of this from a flexibility and efficiency standpoint is to understand that the whole adjudication process is in the control of the township from a timing perspective, as well as a cost perspective. And it will still allow for some serious offenses to be taken to court if the situation warrants it. So you could, for most bylaws, not all, but for most bylaws, you can run a dual system. So for the minor offenses or ones where you're looking for quick resolution, you can issue an AMPS ticket and they either pay it or they come in and they discuss it with the screening person. But if it's a serious offense or it's a continual or repeat offender, then there's still the opportunity to go to court if that if that does make sense. Again, the POA system really does not have a lot of flexibility in terms of what can be done with a ticket. It's either, you pay it or dispute it. Screening and hearing officers have the ability to take partial payments or lower payments, or if it's someone that has several tickets, introduce a payment plan. So it really is a negotiated settlement. The other thing that can happen as well is that it may and likely will cut down on legal costs for staff and perhaps prosecutors having to attend court.
Thanks, Shane. And again, just another example from the township. So in July, we had 13 tickets that went to POA court in a group last year. In July 2023, our township lawyer attended. Justice of the peace was unavailable, so we had to find another date. We then went back November 2023. We resolved 9 of the tickets. There were 4 tickets that were rescheduled by the justice. Went back again December 2023. We resolved the final 4 tickets. That was not very efficient in my opinion. Under the AMP system, we could have probably resolved a lot of those matters at first screening. Anything else that couldn't be resolved there would undoubtedly be faster than that 2-year time frame. And then each time right now that we're attending court, it's the township's lawyer is our prosecutor, and then we have bylaw officers on standby, and that wouldn't be needed under the AMPS process. So significantly more efficient, more flexible system, as Shane was describing. Back to you.
Uh, Thanks, Jeff, and through you, Mayor Shantz. We've already discussed the AMPS process being more flexible. Uh, The system also allows for graduated fines if the township wishes to go that route, so that repeat offenders could face higher fines or higher penalties, I should say. That's the word that's to be used for repeat offenses still outside of the court system. So and Jeff's heard me use the phrase tools in a toolbox, and the AMP system is exactly that, a very efficient tool to be used by officers when the situation warrants it. And the key, of course, is always knowing what tool to use, whether you're a carpenter or mechanic or whatever. It's just the situation warrants a particular approach. Penalty notices can be mailed to the vehicle owner, which comes back to the officer safety risk that I mentioned earlier. Hopefully it doesn't happen very often, but areas like school zones can be a contentious issue. And when you've got vehicles moving in and out and at a quick pace and the officer's in the middle of that situation, risking the safety risk increases both to the public and to the officer. So having the ability to serve these notices in a different, less intimidating manner, again, becomes a safety factor for both the public and for officers. And the last point on here, just repeating the toolbox scenario.
Thanks, Shane. And then just in terms of an example for Woolwich Township, this is a report just sort of shrunk a little bit from one of the officers that did some school parking. A gray SUV ran a stop sign at Shields and Joseph, then parked, faced the wrong direction in front of a school bus, and then sped off before the officer could speak to the driver or write a ticket. This is the third time the same vehicle has done this. So under the POA system, officer can't issue a ticket because they can't serve it to the person or on the vehicle. Of course, we report the speeding and the blowing through a stop sign to the police, but they don't let us know the outcome of that if they followed up. Under an AMPS process, the officer could take a picture, document the infraction, and at least the parking ticket could be sent to the person by mail. It, of course, reduces the need for police involvement. However, of course, bylaws still cannot issue tickets for speeding or failure to stop. Those are police matters. One of the things I had in the report, it isn't actually on the slides, is that it also helps the POA court system, which isn't a benefit to the township, but sort of a broader benefit to taxpayers. With that, I'm going to transition to the manager position, and of course, we'll have questions, any questions at the end. So we're proposing this new position. It's a net cost of $63,000, and it's funded from assessment growth because it really is a growth-related cost, growth in terms of the number of people that we're serving, the number of complaints we're getting, and the type of issues that we're dealing with. Right now, so our service request growth has grown about 33%. Focus for bylaw officers lately has been on resident requests. So we are trying to follow up with our customer service policies and respond to people in the time that we say we will. Unfortunately, that means that we have given less priority to requests that are coming from our own staff. So we are slow to respond to other staff, and that can cause work in other departments. And we haven't prioritized bylaw review because we've been dealing with public requests. So things like things that are on our work plan, there's been a few requests that have come through council. We are behind on looking at some of our set fines, and there's other issues as well. And then all the things we talked about with AMPS, without the bylaw manager position, AMPS will have to be delayed or scoped just because we won't have the capacity to do it all. This is a better, sort of a more visual representation of the types of, or the number of complaints that we're dealing with. And just to give council some history, so 10 years ago, 2023 was the first year we had 2 bylaw enforcement officers. And if you look at that trend line on the screen, we were dealing with just under 600 complaints, so about 300 per officer. In 2017, we actually, we had a retirement and we removed the senior position in favor of 2 officers. That was really a decrease in service from my perspective. We had a senior and then we went to 2 regular officers. And then in 2018, the Waterloo Regional Police Services Board passed a resolution and confirmed that police will no longer respond to bylaw enforcement matters. So not no Waterloo Region Police Service, but just no service for bylaw matters. And I think you see a corresponding increase in the complaints that we're dealing with. And then in 2019, our complaints went down again because we had the Humane Society take over our animal control. And if you want, I can show you the slide, the stats with those numbers included. But even with without the animal control that the Humane Society does for us, we're now looking at about 900 complaints. So if we did have three bodies, we'd still be at the about 300 complaints per officer level. We'd get back to where we were in 2013. Moving on to the crossing guard budget. This is a status quo budget. Not much here. Moving on to HR, highlights are we have allocated some additional staff to HR for admin and project support. There is a new line in your budget that's for health and wellness initiatives, and that's really just for tracking. There's a $0 impact on that. And then I'm not sure if we told council this before, but we are taking part in the WSIB Health and Safety Excellence Program. And as we increase our health and safety program, we're hoping for some rebates in that area. And finally, the corporate overhead budget is included in corporate services. The most significant change to this area is the reduction in the OMPF provincial grant that Stephen already talked about, that we received from the province. That is about just over $41,000 in reduced operating revenue. And with that, I and my team would be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to start? Councillor Kiddo.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Director Smith or some of the other presenters, perhaps. I'm just wondering with the AMP system, how many other townships or cities in our region have one that's currently being used?
So through you, Mayor Sean, I think I can answer that. Kitchener and Waterloo already have an AMP system in place. They started with parking tickets about 5 years, 2019. Oh, I was right, about 5 years ago. And they have more recently moved to adding, it was a good about 20 more bylaws to the AMPS program. The townships are looking at it, and I know Cambridge is looking at it as well, but they haven't started implementing it. What we're looking at is to start with parking and it's about 5 additional bylaws. There'll still be lots of work to do if we want to continue forward to add more bylaws to the list, but just to start small and sort of work our way up. Oh, my apologies. Cambridge has been approved for AMPS and they are going live this spring. So I was a little out of date on that one.
Just one follow-up. That case that you had provided to us, a little alarming, but I would hate to say that it's not the normal. So is it an outlier to have a 2-year process in dealing with a ticket? Is that something that we should be concerned about? My take is that is a bit of an outlier, but it's problematic regardless, and I recognize that. I'm just trying to get a sense of how many parking tickets would take 2 years to resolve.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the councillor, I can say that it's my experience, both at the 2 municipalities here in Waterloo Region and with working with other municipalities, I can tell you that it's not an outlier. Talked to several, and I will say larger municipalities, but they're right now dealing with tickets that date back to 2021 and prior to the pandemic. So a parking ticket taking 2 years to go through the court system is somewhat normal. I mean, it seems excessive, but just given the amount of time that it's taking, what we're seeing across the province is a lot of municipalities are simply withdrawing their tickets because they know that they're not going to get the court time to deal with them in a timely fashion.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to Clerk Smith. Do you know how many tickets we are issuing on average for parking?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, we're just over 1,000 a year, the last time I looked.
And how many of these are repeat offenders? I know that I'm just pulling numbers at you, but I'm just curious.
That I couldn't answer off the top of my head, I'm sorry. If you want, I can look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing, because I know the Breslau area parking is a big concern, and that's the reason I'm asking. I'll leave that with you. If you could sort of let us know how many are repeat offenders, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Burgess.
Thanks through you, Mayor Shantz. What's the downside, Dams? Like, you're only speaking positive things. Why would a township choose not to go that route? Or is there nothing?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, I'll start and maybe I'll ask Shane to pick up if I've missed anything. This is a real opportunity, and I think it's something that the province has been suggesting in order to reduce the backlog that they're seeing in the POA courts. I will say it's both an opportunity and a challenge. So some of the things that we've said in terms of, council will be the approver for penalty amounts instead of fine amounts. What we do right now is we submit those fines. Like when we report to council, we say these are the fines that we're going to seek from the province, but then we report that to the Crown Counsel's office, and then the approval comes from the Regional Senior Justice. If we don't do that, we're going to have to be very careful in looking at our own fines and making sure we're reviewing everything very carefully so that we're not, because we don't have that second and third level review in the Crown Counsel and the Justice. So we're going to have, it is going to take more staff time to make sure we're doing things properly. If we implement our own hearing system, instead of the POA system, again, it's going to be some staff time to arrange those things, and we're going to have to contract for a hearing officer or partner with another municipality to do that. So it is time, and one of the things I pointed out in my presentation is I don't think we can get to at least where I proposed without the manager of enforcement services position. We would really have to scale back, and I'm not even sure we can make the deadlines that we've tried even with a scaled back program.
And there's no liability to the township based on what we choose for penalties or how we adjudicate the justice of it.
Through you, Mayor Shantz. I'm a little biased, I'll be honest, because I've lived the system, but I don't see really a downside as much as with any program, there's a potential risk. And the risk would be that that the municipality doesn't or isn't as effective with their screening process. So the province has, as part of the AMPS process and giving municipalities the ability to run their own system outside of the court system does come with some responsibilities. So an AMPS program will require that council pass a set of policies to help guide staff. And for example, one would be that the fines or the penalties that council approves cannot be excessive. They have to be just what's deemed to be necessary to gain compliance. So you can't be unreasonable in your fine. So that would be a risk there if the township chose not to, or not to abide by that and look more at the dollar figures than the compliance factor. Another factor, sorry, excuse me today. Another factor would be that municipalities also have to have a process in place to ensure that people that are facing financial hardship but have penalties owing are given some consideration, such as payment plans or perhaps either a payment plan, more time to pay, maybe slight reductions, that sort of stuff. So those policies are in place. And I guess the risk would be not following those policies.
Okay, thank you for that. Like, it sounds like a good program to me, so appreciate it.
Councillor Schwinn.
Thanks. Looking for some history on the school crossing guard program. A little bit surprised it's a township issue versus a school board issue. And curious yeah, how that came to be.
Through you, Mayor Shawns. So under the Highway Traffic Act, a school crossing guard can only be employed by a municipality. That is where we get our authority, and that is the only way to do it.
Councillor Cadell.
Just back to amps for a second. I think I know the answer because you already said that the municipalities aren't in control of speeding, but I'm just wondering, you know, in a future version of this, could we implement ACE in association with the amps? Have other jurisdictions done something like that? I know that ACE, you know, automatic speed enforcement is something that's more maintained at the regional level. Is that something that we could look at maybe in the future if we were to implement this?
Through you, Mayor Shantz. First of all, Councillor Cadeau, I will say that I've not been privy to direct discussions that other municipalities within the region are having with the region, but I do know that there is a movement across some municipalities that are two-tier systems to allow for some more control over where the automated speed cameras are put in their municipalities and the ability to share some of that revenue. So I would say that it's certainly a discussion point that's happening now. The outcome of it is probably going to be dependent on a region by region basis. But I do know that, just to repeat myself, I do know that those discussions are happening within Waterloo region.
We have talked about it around the regional council table too, and looking at implementing it with a department at the region that would operate it, and it's supposed to be revenue neutral. So sort of on a cost recovery basis. I think the previous with the current system, I think it's going through a company in Toronto, and they just couldn't manage if we increased our cameras the way we'd like to. So that's the route that we're going here. Anyone else? Councillor Schwint.
Going back to lottery revenue, you mentioned that's been decreasing over time, and I see it's a pretty small number to begin with. Is it worth being in that business and collecting a fee or a license, or would we be better off taking that out and encouraging charitable organizations to keep their revenue?
Thank you, Councillor Schwint. Through you, Mayor Shantz. That is a discussion that has been happening at the clerk's table as to whether this is a service that we continue to provide. My opinion would be we'd like to see a couple years post-COVID before we make that decision to not offer that service anymore, to better see what that trend is. And if Clerk Smith has anything else to add.
I will just add that I believe that charitable organizations can get a license from the province if they want to run a lottery. My only caution to council, and the reason why we didn't bring it forward, we're not seeing a whole lot of revenue, so let's just go ahead with it, is that I think we provide better service here at the township than saying go to the province and and do this. I completely agree with Deputy Clerk Smith that if this is something that is a continued decrease in revenue, that it's something we should look at. But if and when we bring that forward to council, we'll also be looking at things like the customer service aspect of it, which may not be the same as the township provides if you're going to the province.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, I am. Councillor Cadeau.
Just one more question. You had mentioned the part-time admin had been reallocated. Can you provide some context on that? If it was a part-time, was it just a part-time? Was it a shared position with another area? I'm just trying to get a sense of what happened to that position. Because I know that we've had discussions about admin support in the past.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shawns. So we had a part-time position. The role was admin assistant, and that person would split their time between bylaw enforcement and the clerk's division. part of what they were doing, sorry, I should say administration and licensing officer. So part of what they were doing was licensing, and part was sort of general assistance, ordering supplies, booking meetings, things like that. When that person resigned last year, rather than just automatically rehire, we took a look at our needs and what were the priorities for the department. It also, just because it happened fairly quickly, we had been looking at doing some cross-training and some backfilling with our bylaw officers from the licenses that they issue. So vendor licensing, kennel licensing, those kind of things. The Enforcement Services Department or Division actually goes out and does the inspections, but then we had a different person that was issuing the license. So when that happened quickly, we transferred that to bylaw enforcement. It had actually been going fairly well. So what we did is, instead of rehiring for that role, we increased some of our part-time hours, and you'll see our part-time hours are a little high last year, partly because we made that shift. But that's actually been working pretty well, and I think we can keep up with that licensing piece. I'll also say that, you know, we've been doing some of our own meeting bookings, and it's busy in the clerk's office, I can tell you that. It's nice having some backups and other things like that. So it was great having that role, but from a priority perspective, it just didn't fit in the budget this year.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We'll give a moment while we shuffle seats, and then next up is finance. Go ahead, Mr. Fairweather. Welcome again.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I've been asked to present the financial services budget to members of council. Our department has 3 divisions. We have management, budget, accounting, and revenue. The major changes within our budget in 2024 are we've increased the transfer to reserve funds for the infrastructure levy by 1.5%, or $215,000. We have an increase in investment income of $218,000, and we brought forward a position we're seeking for a new revenue clerk for a cost of just over a little over $64,000. And that position is split between tax, wastewater, and the tax and water. So the tax portion of funding would be about $21,400. And because it's related to growth, we've offset that cost by assessment growth in 2024. And with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Okay, Councillor Burgess.
Thanks, Mayor Shantz. I have a couple, if that's all right.
Mhm.
Through you to the director. With that new role, part of that is through taxation, like part of their role. Would that take any pressure off the manager or director of finance, or is that kind of just helping spread out the other roles? Or yeah.
Through the mayor, that position would be under the direction of Teresa. And it will take some of the load off the finance director. The reason we're looking at the position is we've reached a point where we just don't have enough capacity to continue on. We've increased basically about 800 water accounts in 3 years. And we're at the point now that we're performing about 490 final reads a year. So when you take those volumes, we just don't have enough resources to be able to carry out the work that we need to do on that many water and wastewater accounts. Plus, each of those new water accounts creates an additional tax account also. So it's to provide some depth in the department to cover those off. You can go along for a period of time and add a few accounts here and there, but you reach a point where you just can't manage anymore. So you need to add the additional resources and then you continue on.
Okay. Just follow up through you, Mayor Shantz. So on page 116 there, right at the start, our 2023 actual for the management and budget line was basically 1.3 under the budgeted amount. So you got 1.1 versus a budget of 2.5. If you scroll down, it looks like most of that difference was because we didn't send money to the reserve fund. Why was that?
Through the mayor, the reserve fund transfers are predominantly done towards the end of the year as year-end working adjustments.
Yeah.
In 23, a lot of those have not been booked. We're
Okay.
just working through those entries now to
Okay.
book all those.
So they're still expected to happen, we just haven't recorded
Yep.
as of now. Okay, and
Oh, there, it is now. Sorry.
my last question there on page 119, our debenture repayment is $60,000 approximately projected, 59. Why is that so low when we have 3.4 million in debenture currently? Or where's that number coming from? If you can expand on that.
Yeah. Through the mayor, some of those are contained. The major debenture that's outstanding for the city is, as you previously asked in the morning session, is for the community center. And that debenture does expire in 2034.
Okay.
The reduction in the ask in 2024 is due to some of the deferred revenue for the DCs is dropping off. There's no more payments to be made. So that's why it's down to $41,000.
So part of it's shown under RCS, you're saying is
Yeah.
basically what it is? Okay. So that's what you're talking about in that little explanation box on the side, the DC exemption repayment?
That's correct.
Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Schwinn.
You mentioned adding all the accounts is creating a lot of work in the finance department. Overall, are we as automated in our accounting systems as we could be, or is there are there opportunities there? I guess both in accounting, but also the clerk's office and other departments to become more automated and more efficient?
Through the mayor, there is a project that was on the books to look at replacing the financial applications. And that they've gone out to market and they're still in the process of evaluating that. There's always opportunities to improve. My understanding is that there was a lot of investment made to move forward with the automated reading for some of the meters. And we're getting the information in. It's just, there's not enough resources to be able to conduct a lot of analytical work on those. So they struggle with trying to look at, do we have patterns of high leaks? Is there water running in certain neighborhoods or in certain properties? So they don't have the resources to do that. And right now we're up to about 7,300 water and wastewater accounts and more in the property side. So it's time that we looked at staffing up the resources to keep it going in the billing. There's an error factor that comes up when you bill, in that you could have a person that's gone south for the winter, and therefore you're getting zero reads or lower consumption. It requires time for the billing clerks to investigate that, and either if it isn't something like that, then they have to initiate a work order for Public Works to go out and check the meters and things. So it's all that workload that comes with it. That is time to add the additional resources to staff up to meet the expectations. With the number of final reads at over 400, they're doing about 2 a day on final readings coming through. So that requires them to initiate the read, generate the final bill, close the account, and initiate the establishment of the new account. So there's quite a bit of work that is on the one individual, and they're struggling to keep on top of that.
Councillor Cadeau and then Councillor Burgess.
Thanks, Mayor Shantz. Through you to the interim director. I know during our previous budget deliberations, we had heard about the need for more of an automated system, to Councillor Swinch's point. Are we still working off of an access database with our finance system?
Through the mayor, that's correct.
And, being a third party coming in, how do you find that system? How do you find the ability to navigate through that system?
It's meeting the capture of the information. It's very difficult to do it. There's only a limited number of people that understand the import and export routines on it. And it's takes a fair bit of effort to get information on individual account status and spending. So it's not a great system. There is other applications out there, and the township could gain some efficiencies by moving on to a better platform.
A final question then. I know that there was deliberations about just that. Is this something that we could purchase off the shelf and implement? Is this something that we would have to kind of build from scratch up or find somewhere in the middle? How far out do you think we are from actually implementing a new automated system that's going to take us off that access database? And what kind of a cost is going to be associated with that?
I haven't looked at the responses through the mail that have been received from the RFPs that went out. I know prior to Richard's absence, he was evaluating those and conducting some analysis. I have spoke with him on that. He still has to complete some work on that side. So usually it takes you anywhere from 8 to say 18 months to implement a new application for financial. There's several different components, and to ensure the integration with all of your other applications, it's usually around that timeline. You can get off the shelf, so they call it systems, but in order to meet the processes and workflows within an organization, some of those do require workflow programming, and therefore that's what takes the time on the implementation of those applications.
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz. I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but in the package we got in the draft budget report, one of the ways you guys were looking at reducing our overall levy was to collect 100,000 in additional dividend revenue from Innova. Can you expand on that? What are we losing by not taking it, or what's it? Yeah.
My understanding is the dividend that's within the budget, I think it's a little over $600,000 of dividend income is included in there. That's been confirmed as what we expect to receive from them. So there is whatever was in there is what is expected to be collected in 2024.
They were talking about taking an extra 100, I think, to reduce that 8.5 to 7.5. So is that even a doable thing, or is that, am I missing the?
Mr. Brannaman.
So I want to, through you, Madam Mayor, so I want to double check this with Richard, because it is something before he went off that we looked at. I thought that actually what we were trying to evaluate was whether there was an additional amount of money that we could be counting on. Were we as accurate as we needed to be with respect to the dividend to be expected, and whether there would be an opportunity there to help mitigate the situation. So between now and Thursday, we'll double check on that situation.
I'll take this opportunity to jump in and put my 2 cents worth, because for years I've been advocating to reduce the amount of the Innova dividend that we put into operating and put the dividend eventually into a reserve and use it out of a reserve instead of counting on it for operating. A couple of years ago, we got there was some concerns. We had to do some rejigging because the dividend was actually lower than we had anticipated and had accounted for in our operating. So that would just be in terms of the Innova dividend. That would be where I'd like to see it go, where less of it is being used to prop up our operating and being put into a reserve to use for whatever we need it for, whether it's a deficit or whatever it might be. Councillor Cadeau.
To that point, don't take investment advice from me, but good practice is to reinvest dividends. Is that something that we as a municipality could even look at, is reinvesting that dividends into whatever investment vehicle is producing said dividends? Is that something we could explore?
That's our share in Inova, which is Water North Hydro piece. So I don't think there are other shares that we can reinvest in, but David, go ahead.
I'll probably look to see if Stephen can assist with this, but I know that, for example, as a municipality, we do have investments that we make. And in fact, even AMO a number of years ago through the local authority service offered up investment opportunities for municipalities to come in. So if I understand your question correctly is, you know, if we say portioned off $200,000 of that, could we then put that money aside and start earning interest on that? You know, that certainly would be something we could explore. But I think the other thing I would add to the discussion is that you continue to see where we're challenged with respect to our infrastructure and the need for capital investment. You know, it would, you know, we've had a brief discussion, Stephen and I mean, obviously, and even with the mayor, you know, it's a sizable amount of money. You couldn't just shift naturally all at once, and it would take a series of years. And, you know, and then it would just be how we accomplish that. So there wouldn't be as big an impact. But ultimately there should be a game plan. You know, is it into investments? Is it into the infrastructure reserve to supplement that? Or could it be a combination of things? But I understand, you know, historically where the mayor would like to get us to. And I guess the best example of, you know, what we would be trying to do here in some way is look at the impact over the years of us receiving a reduction in our Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, you know, like 10-15% per year. That obviously had an impact, you know, and if you phase something in, you can minimize the impact of that shift or adjustment. So it would have to be a multi-year phase in or staging plan that would need to be done.
Did you have anything to add, Mr. Fairweather, on that one?
No, just as David had spoken with me regarding that, and the amount that you have in there right now is about $650,000. So if you were planning to phase it out over a period of time, and if you pick a 10-year window, it'd be about a $65,000 reduction in revenue annually, which is around a 0.4% of the tax rate, right? Increased to offset that revenue reduction. But you can look at it and figure out how far you want to go down with that. It might not be the whole amount. You might want to spread it over a longer period of time. So there's various options. It's just, if that's the direction of council, we would bring back a plan of how to get to where you want to get to. Following up on David, yeah, we do invest the excess funds. So whatever is available to be invested, the city does invest. We're limited in scope of type of investments. They've got to be secure. And any money we do invest from our reserve funds must be available and back in the reserve fund prior to when it's required to be utilized. So we put out as much as we can for as long as we can, and we search for the best rates when we're doing that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Sure. Clerk's reminding me it's about halfway through the afternoon and maybe we should take a 10-minute break. So why don't we do that? We'll come back at 2:40. Okay, I'll call us back to order. You ready to go? Kayla, can I get you to turn your camera on? Thanks. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. And we'll carry on and turn the floor over to CAO and Economic Development and Tourism Operating Budget and Mr. Brenneman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to council, I'm pleased to be able to present the operating budget for the CAO's office. The two primary divisions that report into the CAO's office are Economic Development and Tourism, and also the Fire Services Department. Fire Services will be doing a separate presentation today because of the level of detail with respect to their operating budget. In terms of the CAO's office, I want to zero in on just really the major budget change for this year. Further to a report that was presented to council this past year in 2023, we are still looking to seek council's support for the inclusion of a sustainability coordinator position with an April 1st start date, with the impact being $82,000. And we're suggesting that it be funded from the Climate Action Reserve. And in terms of just one other item out of the 2024 budget that I wanted to remind council on, and also for the viewing public, is we're in the process of completing our new strategic plan. And that is something that will be fully completed by the end of June with a full report to council, and obviously some working sessions for council and senior staff to follow up on some of the community engagement sessions, focus groups, online surveys that have been completed to date. I'm pleased to be able to be joined by Derek Hughes, who is our interim Economic Development and Tourism Officer, while Jenna Morris is on maternity leave. In terms of the major budget shift there, what we've done is we've done an overlap between when our regular officer comes back and when Mr. Hughes's contract would be completed. We've looked to partially offset that by foregoing the normal summer tourism counselor that we've done in the past with respect to a seasonal position to support. When I was first here, that person worked, that part-time position actually worked out of the old yellow brick house next to the farmer's market. And then over time, we actually, once that was gone, with the development of the Holiday Inn hotel development there, we started supporting the Mennonite story with some summer seasonal support there. But we're going to forego that for the time being because we think it's more important to have this transition period between Jenna returning and Derek's contract finishing up. Some of the 2024 projects, and Derek can speak to this in case anybody has any questions or wants any sort of follow-up, but a few of the highlights that we wanted to focus in on from the area of economic development and tourism is we continue, you'll recall that we got some funding Jenna was able to obtain some funding out of OMAFRA to support a COVID recovery business retention expansion program where we were able to go out and talk with the businesses about what their unique priorities and needs were. And certainly there continues to be work as a result of those results and an action plan that needs to be implemented. As well, there is some great work that's been supported, I believe, with funding from RTO4. Again, just for everybody's benefit, RTO4 is the province a number of years ago created provincial regional tourism organizations, if I could call it that way. And we're part of RTO4. Sometimes we're able to benefit from obtaining funding opportunities and support from that group. And that was the case here in terms of where we brought together RTO4, ourselves, our Explore Waterloo Region Regional Tourism Organization, the St. Jacobs BIA, the St. Jacobs Farmers Market, and again, I'll call it the post Mercedes Corp era, the post Shantz family area, where we've transitioned from Mercedes Corp and their brand around St. Jacobs country, and moving now with the BIA and the farmers market being under really separate ownership, so to speak, trying to work on what the future looks like from a branding and wayfinding perspective. Again, to be able to recognize influences with respect to where the tourism industry is going, the type of tourists that are coming to the area, and what's the best way forward in terms of making sure we're successful and continue to be successful in, I would say, and some around my regional CAO's table would say maybe I'm biased, but I believe St. Jacobs is the most significant tourism brand and draw within the region of Waterloo. And has it morphed and changed over the years? Post 9/11, absolutely. There's been a transition, but just like in the region, and we continue to innovate and change, we need to be able to morph with all of that. And so there's been some really good work from all those partnerships. Dare I say as well that there will be a future report that will come forward from Derek with respect to how we could actually use some of the municipal accommodation tax funding that we collect from our hotels to be able to support the implementation of the branding and wayfinding signage program. There also is some work that's being done with respect to tourism recovery strategy. And we continue to do a lot of work with our agriculture tourism partners. In the past, that started with an organization that used to exist called Food Link Waterloo Region. They used to do a lot of work in terms of promoting really like the simple fact that some of the best ways that we can support our local agricultural community and also promote our tourists, visiting those locations is by actually getting out there into the local farm lanes, the farm stands, et cetera, and buying the produce and supporting them. However, we have led the way in terms of working with other partners in actually retransforming that mapping, again, to show where tourists can go in terms of these farm lanes and commercial operations. And so that's something else that's being worked on, again, from a support of agritourism. And of course, there's the ongoing support that we do for small and medium enterprise support. And with that, either myself or Derek would be happy to answer any questions that you may have with respect to either the CAO's office or the Economic Development and Tourism budget.
Okay, questions?
We may as well start with harder ones first. We've got a climate change position in the budget. As CAO, how do you evaluate the performance of a potential hire in their work plan after year one, after year three? How are you going to measure that success or less success?
Yeah. Very good question through you, Madam Mayor, to council. I would say there's a multitude of ways in which this particular position will need to be evaluated. Recognizing first that the previous council endorsed the commitment to implement the climate action plan for Waterloo Region, and the various 45, 46, 47, I forget now, the various actions that are directly related to the area municipalities implemented. Ultimately, that position will be evaluated based on the fact that taking that plan, developing short, medium, and long-term plan of action to be able to implement those actions, and ultimately being able to execute on those actions and stay on time, on budget, you know, in terms of being able to implement those priorities. Because, you know, at the end of the day, I appreciate that it was the previous council that endorsed the commitment of a 50% reduction by 2030 and an 80% reduction by 2050. But my principal concern, and the rest of the senior management team, is without a dedicated resource, any of those actions that are identified in that plan that we bought into, albeit, as I said, the previous council, it will be tough to be able to execute on those. And, you know, it's something that our commitment to those targets would have to be reevaluated as part, I would suggest, of this budget process if we can't get some level of support for the position. That being said, again, going back directly to your question, the other thing that I think is good about discussing how would this position be evaluated, I want to draw a comparison between the fact that before Jenna Morris, our regular economic development and tourism officer, went off on maternity leave, she did a report to council with respect to all of the areas of funding that we were able to access, either through OMAFRA, through the Rural Economic Development Program, through RTO4, the Regional Tourism Organization, the Waterloo Wellington Community Futures, etc. I believe some positions, like the economic development and tourism, or in this case, climate action, should be evaluated based on, you know, we're saying one of the reasons we need this position is to be able to tap in all of the available funding out that's available. In order to effectively and efficiently make sure that we're finding out all possible opportunities, not only exploring, but able to access them to help offset some of the program that we have to implement through the Waterloo Region Climate Action, that would be another way in which the position should be evaluated. Lastly, the third way that I would draw your focus, your attention to is with respect to regular reporting to council in the infancy of the position, I think it would be important for council to understand how this position also is able to support all of the other departments with respect to some of their work plan and priorities. Because, for example, right now, you know, over the course of the last couple of years, certainly Mr. Poupé and Mr. McGuire's teams have done yeoman's work trying to deal with the habitats that have developed around our stormwater management ponds. But respectfully, when we go in there and we actually start to really cut back on those areas, we've been heavily criticized for some of the environmental cuts that we've done, et cetera. And while we do our best to defend those actions and the work by trouting out the plans that were originally designed for how that stormwater management plan was supposed to work and how it was to be designed, it's not cutting it when we're trying to be able to capably defend ourselves with the members of the public that have come used to the habitat and the environment that have developed around there. I think ultimately we will benefit from having a sustainability and environmental position that has the necessary background and expertise that they can support other departments in ventures like that to make sure that we're getting it right. And for us also to be able to capably back up, you know, the fundamental question. Well, before you actually cut down this area, did you get any outside expertise to make sure that we weren't destroying any sort of habitat, species, things of that nature? That's another area in which I think there will be a residual or outside benefit that we should be able to comfortably and confidently be able to report on. So those are the three areas that come to my mind right now that, you know, in which to evaluate the position. But the number one the number one area in the infancy of the position will be on the development and the execution of an implementation plan, short, medium, and long term, for the climate action Waterloo region priorities.
Other questions? Councillor Burgess.
Thanks, Mayor Shantz. Through you, I just wanted to follow up there on Councillor Schwint's question. It's not a cheap position, but it's one we might need, do need. And I think how do I say this? Right now we're funding it through a reserve fund, and technically that's not what a reserve fund's for. Would we look at all on doing it through a contract for 2 or 3 years instead of a full-time position? Because just two things that come to mind: if we have a change of government federally, which could be coming down the pipe, would that affect some of our funding we could get? We don't want to hire someone if there's not going to be results at this cost. And just being on the tweak board there, sometimes I wonder how much time different departments will have for this position to get stuff accomplished. So those are just a few of my thoughts, and wondering what your thoughts are in doing this as a contract position versus hiring them full-time permanent right away.
Yeah, it's through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor and Councillor Burgess's question. So this is an interesting question to answer. I say that because where I want to start with this is that I've had a long career to date, and you know, one of the things I'm always careful about, you know, is, you know, the whole debate around contract positions. Why I say that is because, you know, in the past, even in these chambers, you know, we've been challenged by council members in the past to say, why are you asking for a contract position if you know the work that is there for a full-time dedicated position for the longer term, right? You're just playing a game, and we don't want to play that game. I think that was a comment coming out of one of the debriefs post to the budget is, you know, if staff feel they can justify and defend that there is sufficient work in the long term for a dedicated position, then that's what you should be advocating for. So outside of that, my other observations over the course of my career is that while contract positions do have their merit, we have to remember the downside in this current market is that you will not get the level of quality and experience that you would hope for if you're actually hiring a full-time dedicated position. I understand what it does in the short term is it allows council to evaluate and you know, in terms of whether there continues to be support, say after a 3-year or a 5-year contract position. But I also was told many years ago, we have to remember, even if we get the chance to hire somebody that's in an experienced situation in a contract position, contract staff have one eye on the calendar and one eye on the want ads. You know, that's an old saying, I think, that has materialized over the years, because everybody at the end of the day is looking for certainty, and we don't give that certainty with respect to the contract position. That all being said, I'll end with what I always do, and that is, at the end of the day, if council in their wisdom, if that's the path they want to choose forward for right now, certainly I think it's obviously better than not having the position supported at all. So in the end, it will be a decision of council whether we've suitably defended and justified the need for this full-time position in the long term. You know, I think I was remiss earlier in not mentioning the fact that, you know, I think council has heard from, you know, in terms of evaluating, to Councillor Schwint's question, evaluating this position, I think some of the valuation hopefully will come as well ultimately from our volunteer groups in terms of whether they see the benefit in the position like they're hoping for, right? Right now we have Tweak, we have Woolwich Healthy Communities, we have WEAC, and all of those groups are hoping for this position to be supported, because there's only so much work that we can expect the volunteers to do. And how do we best support those volunteers? Ann Roberts from Recreation and Community Services, and a lot of the team that Annie and Thomas and the team in Rec and Community Services have have been doing yeoman's work, working with Sandra Bray, et cetera. But respectfully, they've been Band-Aids, they've been stopgap measures. If we're going to make substantial change and movement in the field of sustainability and climate change, and if council in their wisdom sees that as a priority, in terms of moving forward on the 80/50 and the 50/30, then some way you'll see fit to support the position, whether that's ultimately as a contract or we would respectfully suggest full-time dedicated position.
Thank you for that response. And yeah, and I agree with many of your points. It's just that there is work out there. It's just we want to make sure it's getting done and we're getting results, and it's the directors are working with them and all that. I guess one last point, maybe this would be for Thomas Vanderhoff here. That report you mentioned earlier this morning, that won't be coming out prior to our final decision, will it? Just to get a reference on what we can do as a township?
Through you, Mayor Sean. So that report needs to be completed by the end of February. So the plan was to have that before council shortly after that.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to CEO Brenneman, kind of looking at this from the other end of things. It's great to hear, fellow councillors recognize that this is a needed position. I think that's the first time I've heard that recommendation from some councillors. Now, if that's the case, and if the intention is to keep this position not as a contract position, but as an FTE, is the reserve funding the most appropriate place to be taking this from, or should we just add it to the levy as one of those positions that's going to be ongoing from here on out?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cadeau's question, we've had a lot of discussion at the senior management table before we came forward with a recommendation on the climate action. We believe on the balance of all the challenges and the priorities that we have, that it's really a way to try and be responsible for the first few years. We do eventually see, yes, it's not a smart move long-term to take it out of the greening levy. Ultimately, it should be part of the regular operating, no different than any other staffing position. But I think it's ultimately a recognition that as we face so many other challenges, as you've heard today, throughout the day, it's the responsible thing for the here and now from a fiscal standpoint. That's what we've discussed as a senior management team.
Councillor Grant.
There's where we need to make more.
Play the microphone shuffle. Thank you. Through you to David. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was sitting here thinking, I was pretty sure we'd read a report about that this would be something that would be funding from the reserve fund for only a short period of time, with the idea of it being like, this is a good trial run to see if that position is able to even bring in the funding that we think it will be able to do and be self-sustaining. So I was glad that you brought that up. The other thing I was pleased to hear you say as well was that if we decide not to support this, that we need to reevaluate our goalposts, because that has been my feeling for the past kind of 2 years about this, is that we're very good at saying that this is a very valuable position and we'd like to see it and that we'd like to hit these goals. But I really look at the lack of funding and the lack of willingness to commit to this position as also us not grappling with the realities of we're not going to hit those targets. And I think tying that reevaluating of those targets to this position in the budget discussion is something we have to seriously grapple with.
I think the other thing, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Grant's observations, it just made me also think something else for council to consider in terms of context. While staff have done a great job doing things off the side of their desk to date, to a point, through our own internal discussions, and perhaps, Mr. Vanderhoff may want to speak a little bit more to this, but, certainly with the work that we're doing with Simcoe and Enviro Stewards, what becomes very obvious is it's great for our staff to be involved in those meetings, to understand what's going on. But ultimately what we need is somebody that understands also the language and the lingo and understand what they're ultimately really talking about in terms of the direction that we need. And that's no disrespect to Mr. Vanderhoff and his team, et cetera. It's just a reality that when you are looking to hire an expert in the field, they ultimately are going to have a better sense for helping to better coordinate and facilitate, not just with the consultants, but also working with the various departments on those own unique needs and opportunities. And,
Yeah, just bringing that expertise to our procurement process when we are procuring goods and services, right? So when we're constructing new facilities, bringing that lens that maybe staff don't have currently, right? We're looking at the replacement of the Maryhill Fire Station, kind of like for like a larger facility to accommodate trucks, that sort of thing. But we're not bringing that greening perspective and that lens and looking at things that we can do to, whether it's a net zero facility or a near net zero facility, that sort of thing. So just bringing that extra perspective.
I envision this position as being part of a lot of meetings, most meetings that happen between staff and perhaps even between staff and outside consultants, but also between and within staff to coordinate those pieces. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. So I was just, another thing that just kind of twinged my thought is we just had one of our longest and earliest fire seasons in the past year. But there's a very real like infrastructure cost to that. And I'm just wondering, not to put Mr. Pepe on the spot, but I'm wondering if he could talk a little bit about the challenges of infrastructure when it comes to climate change. Are we seeing increased flooding and increased like wear and tear on our infrastructure because of it?
Mr. Poupé.
Thank you. Through your Mayor Shantz to Councillor Grant. That's an interesting question. I guess, we can all appreciate climate change is occurring. We can see that in our winters, obviously here, a lot of freeze thaw. That has significant impacts on some of our road networks and so forth. What I think our department, quite frankly, struggles with in this realm is, I think to the point that is being raised here, is that we have no expertise in that area. We wouldn't even know necessarily how to put together, a tender package for any type of EV vehicle or anything like that. Like it comes again with, I think, vision and investment. So I think one of the easiest things to do, and I think we've done this in a number of ways, is, we looked at LED lighting. So we swapped out all our streetlights. That was great. That was an easy one to do. That was led by the region, and we all got involved. And then we took that on ourselves in our facilities and stuff like that. So there was, again, low-hanging fruit, kind of easy to do. We're beyond that now to really make a difference. And I think that really for us, and you can see this in some of the larger centers, I think Kitchener is well on their way to looking to electrify their fleet. We're buying battery-powered hedge trimmers and some of that stuff. We are making that move. There's a little bit of a cost addition to that, but in the long term, you save money. So you're making that investment now, it's greater, but it saves you down the road. And I would add that it's the right thing to do. I think, it is a finite world and we're trying to do the best we can to sustain that. So from a municipal governance perspective, quite frankly, Woolwich lacks in that vision and in that resource to help really all the departments. So again, I think we're just trying to, I hate to say this, kind of keep the wheels on as best we can, but we don't have a lot of the resourcing or help in that critical area. That's probably the best way I could answer that.
David.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to council, this whole discussion also reminded me of the fact that one of the other areas that council should be aware of that we really need to be mindful of. A number of years ago, we said we were going to be making an investment in expertise around community emergency management coordination. And so we have a full-time CEMC. As climate changes, as more extreme weather happens, case in point, we're having an unpredictable winter. First thing this morning, senior management got an email from our CMC to say, got notice from the GRCA about the fact that their alarms are going off in Westmount Rose because ice buildup is happening. And sometimes there's no explanation for some of the frazzle ice that gets created, but frazzle ice is very concerning because it can happen so quick, and then the flooding happens quicker than, say, a normal spring flood might come on. Where I'm going with all of this is, you know, there's a lot of work that's been done and a lot of expertise that I think we can benefit from an emergency management standpoint in terms of climate adaptation for our infrastructure, in terms of our programs, in terms of our planning, that ultimately needs to be done. Because there's trends and analysis that needs to be done. Again, we can benefit from expertise in the field and having a dedicated resource to be able to assist. So, Madam Mayor, to your comment, you can see this position being involved in many conversations. That's another example of support. You know, we don't expect our community emergency management coordinator to be an expert in all of the climate adaptation types of issues, but we do expect that person to be able to be assisted by somebody that has the expertise to be able to implement changes with respect to climate adaptation and infrastructure changes.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll move on to fire and welcome Chief Aldis.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Helping me with my budget today will be Deputy Eveson, so we will be able to answer questions for you. The first slide that you see before you is in our budget outlines our call volume for the last 5 years. Each station is represented by a color. You can see, we use Elmira as an example, is blue. You can see how their call volume is going up and up and up substantially over the last 5 years. All our other stations are basically following suit. So as you can see, this starts to put strain on our firefighters for showing up to calls and stuff, but it's a much needed service for the township. So with the first slide you see before you is we're going to talk about the increase to our transfer of equipment reserve fund of $167,000. As you're well aware, our the prices for some of our equipment has substantially went up basically overnight and keep going up. So we need to keep making this investment into our equipment reserve to accommodate the cost of our purchasing new fire trucks and other equipment like our SCBA that we use for firefighting. The next substantial one that we have for there's an increase is the training officer position from part-time to full-time. With the direction given from council last year at budget, I met with all the township chiefs and we had a meeting to discuss the possibility of hiring a joint training officer for everybody. We discussed the prospect of having the joint training officer to coordinate in our already established joint training program. Through those discussions, we realized it was a little bit more than what we should really be discussing ourselves. So we reached out and had a meeting then with our CAOs as well. It's hard enough trying to get 4 people to meet in the room that are from 4 different areas. When you add the CAOs, it's another complicated matter altogether. But we had a meeting, and with that meeting, we had the training officer from Wellington County came in. He discussed with us his position, how it was created, the roles and responsibilities, and any ways that he seen that he could improve with that position. So after that discussion, presentation, we met then afterwards with the CAOs and fire chiefs and we discussed the prospect of having this joint job. Through the discussions, we realized that doing this joint job would be, having a joint training position would be an ideal position. But the CAOs and chiefs from other municipalities stressed with us, that's not what Woolwich's need is right now. They agreed that we should be looking at a full-time position first before considering hiring a joint position to look after all our needs together. So with that, though, I also talked to some other fire chiefs from other municipalities similar to us that are volunteers. And we discussed how they do things. So I talked with the chief from Norwich, and they, in Oxford County, they have a joint training group. So we discussed how that worked. I talked with the chief from North Perth, and she actually recommended, her council asked her about being able to use it as a joint to help other areas around. And she said potentially in the future, but right now their need is just themselves. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And to give you some idea of the dynamics of our volunteer groups just within Waterloo region. So as you're well aware, the Township of Woolwich is the largest geographic municipality within the town, within the region of Waterloo. We are currently the largest volunteer fire department with 160 firefighters and 6 stations. Our other volunteer departments within the region are smaller than we are, and we make up approximately 49% of all the volunteer firefighters in Waterloo region. And to give you a little breakdown on how this is Wilmot, the Township of Wilmot has 3 stations, 80 firefighters, and they have 3 part-time training officers working combined 42 hours a week. Wellesley has 3 stations and 65 firefighters, and they don't really have an organized, that I'm aware of, training, just 2 gentlemen look after it for them. And North Dumfries has 1 station, 30 firefighters, and they have a part-time training officer that works 15 to 20 hours a week, depending on what his work schedule is like. Us currently, our part-time training officer we're working around his schedule. He's working approximately 50 hours a month, and it's not meeting the needs of what we need currently. The next one is, this is the final year of a previously approved market increase of 7% wages for our firefighters, which is an impact of approximately $38,400 a year. And this is the 3rd of our 4th year for increase of our officers' pays, which is a $26,700 approximate levy hit. And with that, we can take any questions that you would have.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to the chief. You mentioned that the CAOs were against joint training. Can you tell me why? Please elaborate on that one.
Well, they weren't against joint training, but they realized that it doesn't suit the need of what we need right now for Woolwich. We're still going to go down the road of trying to make that happen. It's just going to take a couple of years in order to make that become a reality.
And why don't they feel joint training is what you need now? Do they not feel there would be sufficient time, or what were the reasonings behind that, please?
Mostly it's the size of what we are. On a firefighter to firefighter basis, we employ as many as some small full-time municipalities do. So it's just the necessity of getting our training in order, getting everything lined up for what we need. Currently is a full-time position best suits us, and then going forward, we can work on the joint one to do with our committee.
Thank you.
I think based on the numbers that Chief put out, our service is about equal to all of the services of the other 3 municipalities combined. David.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just to provide Councillor Bryan, the rest of council with some context. So, yes, we met in St. Jacobs. Yes, it was the 4 CAOs and the fire chiefs. But the context that I want to be able to provide definitively is this. We were there, as our fire chief has noted, to propose to the other that we look at some level of collaboration. But after the presentation from Wellington, and ultimately after the discussion also with not just the CAOs, but the other fire chiefs that were in the room, and when we were going down the path of joint training, looking at ultimately the mandatory certification, and ultimately what we're trying to achieve, which is the health and safety of all of our volunteer firefighters, we looked at definitively whether one person could serve all 4 townships. And the ultimate conclusion, not just of the CAOs, but the fire chiefs from the other municipality, was they didn't feel that ultimately if we had the position, that there would be suitable enough resource and capacity for them to be able to be served properly. And that when you look at the math, we have 6 stations, 160 firefighters. So in the mayor's point, if you do the math on, you've got 7 stations and about 160, 170 firefighters. The conclusion, I think, that I want to add to Dennis's context from the other fire chiefs as well was, if anything, their assessment was we wouldn't need just one. If we wanted to do a collaborative, that would be fine, but we'd have to create a situation where you would have 2 officers servicing all 4 townships. So that was the conclusion based on the realities of the training and the health and safety needs that would be. So I want to make sure there's context. It wasn't just the CAOs, it wasn't just the fire chiefs in isolation. It was a discussion over the course of an afternoon where, professionals shared their various opinions. We had that presentation. And ultimately, if we're looking at the realities of our own particular situation, not just our geography, but we have more stations combined, we have more volunteer firefighters, or close to more firefighters combined. We have our own unique needs to be able to justify and support the support for a full-time dedicated position. If we wanted to go with a collaboration, it would be 2 full-time positions to be able to do all 4 townships suitably, where the other fire chiefs would feel that they wouldn't get the short end of the stick in terms of being able to be supported on the implementation of training, mandatory certification, and overall health and safety.
Councillor Schwint and then Councillor Cadell.
Sure, I've got a few actually. I'm gonna leave the training part aside for right now. Is there any chance we get the slide back up where you had 3-year and 4-year pay increases? Just wanted to clarify that if I could. Okay, we got the market increase final year for volunteer officers and 3rd to 4 years for the officer pay. What's the difference between the two, number one? And secondly, is that going to get us to 2020 type equivalency and we're still 4 years behind since inflation's gone up quite a bit since that deal was struck? Or how do we think we are, I guess, entering the final year? Step one.
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Swint. When we developed that program it was to get us to the point where we are in 2024. So that was the projected where it was going to be. So we looked at the market study and then we looked at the general cost of living and what we were normally increasing our firefighters to and by. So then we got us to that point where we are right now. It should be approximately where all our comparators are at. So after the 24 budget, when it comes out, we'll be able to see that for sure. We should be comparable right to where it is.
That's encouraging. I was a little bit worried that inflation might have messed that program up the last 2 years and we were still behind. So, And the difference between the volunteer firefighter increases and the officer pay increase, who would be the officers?
So our, through Madam Mayor to Councillor Swint, so our officers would be our district chiefs, our district deputies, and our captains that are in our stations, and that's, it's a stipend or an honorarium for them to be in that position and do the extra little bit of work that's required by them.
Okay, but still the volunteer.
It's still all
positions.
volunteers.
Thank you. And then the harder question, or a sensitive question, I guess. Why do we have 6 stations? Why don't we have 5?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Schwint, we had 5 a long time ago. Before my time, they moved till 6 with Breslaw. And then Breslaw and Maryhill were running tandem calls, and then they severed Breslaw away, so they're running on their own currently right now. That's the way it was. When we did our last fire master plan, the 6-station model was in that. We were looking at bringing forward a new fire master plan, which could address your concern. But through discussions with SMT, we thought it would be best just to wait until after we see what all the bills that the government is putting in, to see where growth goes, to see if we can manipulate one around or add one or remove one or whatever. It would come out in that time.
I guess we all had our bus tour in the summer looking at different stations, and to me it's quite evident there's one station that's the building's old and small and cramped, and looking at geography, is there room for consolidation to provide better equipment for our volunteers if we centralize and removing Conestoga essentially?
Through Madam Mayor, like that would be, like I said, it'd be something we'd have to do when we redo our fire master plan. And we could look at that. It's a feasibility. When they did the last one, it did look at other options like that. So it does get addressed. I mean, we can look at it when it comes out. And that's about the only way we'd be able to do anything with it at that time, but.
I think if I remember correctly, some of our past discussions centered around response time and availability of our volunteers to actually man or person the stations. Yeah. Thomas.
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor. I'm just gonna start talking. I don't know if you called on me or not, but
No, Thomas was going to weigh in, and then you can.
darn it. Okay.
I was
Nice
jumping
try.
in behind you here, sorry. The rec department, anyways, having just recently reviewed the fire master plan as well too, part of it that Mayor Shantz has touched on is response times, but not necessarily for like Conestoga, but areas like Winterburn, where Conestoga is the closest station. And if my memory is correct in reviewing the master plan, it's those areas that Conestoga serves that the other stations can't serve, in the response time that's required by the legislation or whatever the standard is.
I'm going to speak now, if that's okay. I appreciate that comment, and it feels like we're between a rock and a hard place. We're legislated on one hand between our response time, and then we're legislated on the other hand around our equipment and how modern it needs to be. And when you have 6 stations and you have to have a new truck in these stations every, 25 years, it has a huge financial burden. So I appreciate Councillor Swin's lines of questioning, because I think that we need to start asking these questions. I'm looking at the $167,000 reserve that we're putting for our vehicles, and that's not enough. I think that you'd probably be the first to tell us that the amount of inflation that we're seeing on these vehicles, when we have to start replacing some of these, we're going to have sticker shock, and the amount of money that we have in our reserve may or may not cover it. So I appreciate at least broaching that topic, whether or not we come to an agreement or a solution on that, probably out of the scope of this budget. But I did want to bring it back to training just for a moment. This isn't the first time we've heard a request for this position, and I'm just wondering if you could shed some light on what this past year has been like for this training manager. Are you falling behind again with some of those provincial legislations that were mandated to meet?
Through you, Mayor, to Counselor. Just to speak to what the last year has been like, I wouldn't say chaotic, but very busy. Trying to bring 160 firefighters up to the standard that the province is now required through the mandatory certification is challenging. And part of that challenge is they've outmoded the Ontario Fire College, which used to reside in Gravenhurst. And that used to represent, you could send firefighters there for a week, $65, they'd feed you, they'd house you. And then basically the municipality covers $65 and traveling time and obviously staff time. Now it's gone to a regional training center model, which basically says each township could have their own, or townships could have a training center and deliver fire college courses, but for the cost of about $375 per person per course. So each of these certifications comes at a cost of about $375. And we're quickly discovering that with our current budget restrictions, to send all the people that are required to go to these specialized courses or courses that are delivered at regional training centers is substantial. Having a full-time training officer, they could develop programs in conjunction with some of the other townships as well to deliver this curricula or whatever is needed for that certification through, I don't want to say adjunct instructor, but accredited training facility endorsed by the fire college, which then becomes NFPA certified, and they can deliver that. So we have been looking at various options to kind of circumvent the need for having to send them to regional training centers. But at some point, the levee's going to break, and we're not going to have the resources there with our part-time and myself and Chief Aldis trying to keep up with registrations and testing. Because once you take the course, you also have to have a third-party written test and then a practical evaluation. So that's 3 separate occasions that all have to be scheduled through somebody. Right now, myself and Chief Aldis are managing that on top of all the other administrative responsibilities we have to the township. So.
Councillor Grant, and then back to Councillor Schwint, I think.
Thank you. Through you to Chief Alders. I know earlier when we were talking with the last vehicle replacement, I asked for like kind of a summary of what's coming up for vehicles for us. Can you just give us like maybe broad strokes? Are we talking like 2 vehicles next year, 3 vehicles the year after, or are we kind of, I'm just trying to get a gauge, I guess, for the health of the fleet and what the state of our reserve for that fleet will be. Oh, Willie? Okay, then I'm happy to just kind of put a pin in that then.
Yeah, that is coming up in capital for this year, and then we can talk about what's going forward.
Okay, Councillor Schwint.
Okay, going back to training, probably more so retention. We talked in closed session about retention overall. Can you tell us a little bit about retention of volunteer firefighters? How we're doing? Are we a training ground? I know we got a lot of great people who stayed a long time, but are the people slipping through the cracks as well?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Schwint. So this year, I think we hired 17 new firefighters. Some of the ones that have left us have had to moved out of our area. Some have their family dynamic has changed and it just doesn't fit within their realm. A lot of them that have retired are people that are in the 20 to 25, 30-year range that have been here, and they've got to the age of being in the 50s to 60 range, and the demand of being a firefighter and all the additional training and stuff that's coming up, and they've just decided to call it quits for us, so.
So it sounds like retention isn't an issue. This is just normal turnover, and we say thank you for a lot of years of service.
Yes, so we do have that. We do also do have ones that disappear quickly, but that's just the dynamic of what we're at, so.
I think the final issue I wanted to, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say on the topic of retention, part of retaining good people for a long period of time is having kind of a value added for them, right? We're asking them to do something pretty dangerous over and over and over. So having quality training is paramount to me. That's like one of the pluses. And in order to do that, it has to be well organized, timely, stuff like that. And in order to do that, of course, I'm selling selling here, but the full-time training officer is something that's going to play into that, right? They show up, they take the time away from their family twice a month to come and participate in training. And if it's just kind of lackadaisy, sort of organized off the side of a table, they might be less inclined to show up because now they're not feeling that their needs are being met. So just as a retention thing, most times I find the retention is pretty good here. A lot of long-term people, and kind of the argument about if we train them, they leave. Well, what happens if we don't train them and they stay? Right. So.
And the final question, when we saw the call reports keep on going up, over time, are we differentiating on types of calls and making sure that a fire is the right response service to attend and the right group is heading out? Is there a way to differentiate that, or is that still, I guess, hard to do?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Swint. So right now, there's different tiered levels within the township, within the region. So a full-time fire department in the city runs every medical call that comes across the board. Whatever EMS was runs through, they run to. In Woolwich, a number of years ago, our firefighters were not really liking the fact of getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, going to the hall, going to a call, and either getting there and ambulance canceling them or getting canceled at a station. So we looked at the need for us to attend certain calls. So right now, we only attend basically the major calls that needed to be done. So a major medical incident, like if it's a death, like VSAs, MVs, car accidents and things like that, we don't go to every little one unless ambulance is delayed more than 10 to 15 minutes. And then we would get kicked out to go to those calls on their behalf until they got there.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Brenneman?
Thanks through you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to set some context to and provide some comments around the eventual need for a rec master plan. I would suggest that not only, fire master plan. Fire master plan. With respect to a fire master plan, I think with all of the growth and development that we're also going to have, that will help inform not just with respect to stations, but as we continue to grow ultimately out to 50,000 population, one of the things that's always been evaluated through various rec master plans that I've been involved with here is, also looking at what point with the fire master plan will we get to a point in the population that we need to look at composite situations in terms of our department. Composite meaning a segment that's professional firefighters and a segment that's volunteer. Because we did look at that for Breslau a number of years ago, because we're looking at potentially providing support to the being the fire service for the regional airport. But in the end, the region went a different direction and provided in-house fire department personnel for the coverage that they need to run the airport. However, as Elmira grows, as Breslau grows, we'll have to evaluate not just the number of stations, but also how we are structured operationally from a, a volunteer firefighter, and when do we have the ultimate need to maybe have a portion of dedicated full-time resources, ultimately, there to protect our residents and businesses on a regular daily basis. No different than, professional firefighters in the cities. Obviously, council can appreciate that we continue to promote the long-time benefits of our dedicated volunteers because it is the most cost-effective. It's also the added benefit that we get in terms of people that are invested in the community and doing community building work of their own right in terms of public education, et cetera. So certainly, we want to be able to ride out as long as we can in terms of that cost-effective community building approach. But ultimately, we also need to be mindful of what the future holds with the level of growth and development that is projected to 2050, 2051. And if we see that growth, certainly that will help shape some of the priorities and actions that we'll identify in future fire master plans. Annie, I'm really promoting the rec master plan where both are important documents.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of our budget agenda. We do have a special council meeting right after this, so we'll ask our fire chief and deputy chief to just stay where they are. But I need a, excuse me, a motion to adjourn the budget meeting, and yeah. Councillor Schwint.
Sorry, Mayor Shantz. Just wondering, I think we're back in closed session on Thursday. And there's a couple of questions I forgot to ask in closed regarding labor and personnel. Wondering if I could bring those up at that time as well.
Jeff.
Through the Mayor Shantz, if it's council's will, I can add that to the agenda for Thursday.
Okay, then a motion to adjourn the budget meeting and hold a special council meeting. Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau, all those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. That's all we need for this. Okay, so now we just move right into special council. We'll begin our special council meeting. This is in regard to joint fire protection agreement with Mapleton Township. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Yeah, and I don't see any. I'll turn the floor back over to Chief Aldis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You may remember if we've mentioned it before about, I forget if it was here in SMT, our service agreement with Mapleton hadn't really been looked at since 2011. There's been a few 2% increases here or there throughout the entire, I guess 23 years. So this year I took it upon myself to get it updated. So I met with Chief Redmond from Wellesley because they have been currently doing a 5-year deal with them every year. Their new deal, we kind of brokered our deals together at the same time. So the verbiage in the deal is in each agreement is exactly the same. Keep them kind of standard across the board. One of the things that changed for us is it's just an automatic 3-truck response instead of just our normal response out to there. But that being said, if we add any additional trucks, we have added in Wellesley's and ours is we're going to take the current MTO rate, which in 2023 was $477 an hour per truck, that we can add into that for the amount of time that we're there. So the biggest impact for us is we took from basically 2011 dollar values and brought it up to 2023 rate, in which you can see is the increase is close to $30,000. So it's a substantial increase for us. That being said, that's based on the households or the properties out there from 2011. Because unfortunately, their fire chief retired just as we were starting to work on this agreement. So, and when we redo the agreement in 5 years, we'll go to our new rate for 2028. But we'll also capture all the new properties that are in there from 2011 into 2028. So with that, do we have any questions from council?
Council. Councillor Schwint.
Admit I'm really surprised at the MTO rate being $4.77 an hour. I assume they would be sky high, and that seems really low when I look at prices of fire trucks. So curious if you think that's cost recovery or not.
Through the mayor to Councillor Swint, the rate actually just went up, and it's 500 and something an hour. I don't know how they come up with their rate, but it's the easiest one for us to use, because if we bill car accidents back to the province, that's the rate we have to use. So we use it for our current car accidents, and we use it for this rate just to make it easy for us and the people who send the bills.
Anyone else? I kind of missed something. You're talking about population in 2028. But so between 2011 and 2028, there's been quite a change. So are there places that aren't covered, or what did I miss there?
So Madam Mayor, we still cover all those addresses. We just haven't got them captured in the expense because we don't know necessarily what those are. When their chief retired, it kind of left a big hole in their fire department. And we didn't really know who to get in contact with in order to find that information out to make it the difference. And I figured the substantial increase in rate might get their council a little bit of attention, that if we added another prospectively households on top of it, it would just be that much more.
So will we not be properly, if I can use the term properly, or sufficiently reimbursed for our service until 2028?
Potentially, because I don't know how many properties have actually increased in our coverage area. Like, it's just a small area for us. It's like Yatton and a bit of Wallenstein, and there hasn't been much population growth out there, so.
Okay. Councillor Cadeau.
I'm just trying to make sure that I understand this correctly then. So maybe you just explain that one more time, because I'm struggling with that one too. And I'm going to try and explain it in a way that I understand it. So from 2011 until now, 2023, we are using an antiquated system that was developed back in 2011. We are bringing that up to today's data, but today's data isn't going to capture a lot of the new properties that would have been established from 2011 on. However, our next agreement in 2028 will capture those new properties. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, would someone like to move the resolution? Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I need also a motion that the following bylaw in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and that it be numbered as bylaw number 03-2024, and that it be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. And that is a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of council, which is the business we just attended to. Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? And that's carried. And that brings us to the end of this meeting. Motion to adjourn to meet again in special session on January 25th. Councillor Cadeau, seconded Councillor Grant. All those in favor? And that is carried. So thank you, and thank you to all who participated, attended, or tuned in to the budget and special council meetings today. Council, please stay connected on Zoom until the live stream has stopped. And It says, have a good evening, but we really didn't take that long, so have a good afternoon.